In this video, we will go over the basics of entering expressions into a scientific calculator. Let's begin with a simple example. Here we have 4 plus 6 over 10. And of course, we don't even need a calculator for this one, but let's just first do it by hand, and then I want to point out something about how to enter this in the calculator. So, of course, we should be doing the numerator first. 4 plus 6 is 10, and we're dividing it by 10. So the answer should be 1, and we know that going before even we touch the calculator, so the final answer should be 1. Now here's a common mistake that I see some students entering this into the calculator. So let's first of all pull up our online calculator. So we have 4 plus 6 over, and a common mistake I see is to enter it as 4 plus 6 over 10. And if we press enter, we get a wrong answer. We get 4.6, but we know the answer should have been 1, right? So the problem there is, if you're going to enter all of this in one shot into your calculator, you need to use parentheses properly. So in this situation, because you have more than one expression in the numerator, you should be including that in a set of parentheses when you're actually entering it into the calculator. So we enter it then, open parentheses, 4 plus 6, close parentheses, division by 10, we should get the correct answer. And we do. We get 1. Okay, so now I would encourage you to enter the second example that we have on the screen to your calculators. And you may want to pause the video for a moment and then come back and check to see that you did indeed get the correct answer. So here I have entered this expression into the calculator using plenty of parentheses. Let's take a look. Here we have 2 expressions in the numerator and also 2 expressions in the denominator. So I use a set of parentheses for the numerator as I enter. So I open parentheses, 255 plus 374, close parentheses for the numerator. And then division by, because we had 2 expressions to include, that also has to be contained in parentheses. So open parentheses, enter 543 minus 176, close parentheses for the denominator, and then press enter to get the result. So I'm getting 1.713896 and so forth. So I'm going to copy that to the screen. So 1.713896. Now, there are many digits it's giving us, but if you've studied the unit on significant figures, and because we have units here, seconds, so we should try to give the answer in terms of the correct number of significant figures. And here, basically, when you add these, you're going to have 3 significant figures on the top, 3 significant figures on the bottom. And when you're doing a division, you go by the lowest number of significant figures. So in this case, basically, everything has to be still 3 significant figures in the final answer. And therefore, we're going to leave our answer as 1.71 using 3 sig figs. And if you haven't yet done the unit on significant figures, don't worry about this step. At the moment, just make sure you're entering the values correctly into the calculator and that you are getting the correct answer out of the calculator. Let's take a look at another example. Okay, so here we have once again multiplication combined with a division, basically. And let's see how you would enter this into the calculator. And I would recommend that you try this on your own first and come back and check your answer with us. Okay, so we have 2 quantities being multiplied in the numerator, so start by opening a parentheses. Here we have 5.4 times 10.2 close parentheses, division by 6.25, but before I enter the denominator, I open another parentheses, 6.25 times 3.1, close the parentheses and press enter. So now we're getting 2.8428 and so forth. How many units should we use for significant figures? Again, we have units here, so we should round to the appropriate number of sig figs. So there again, this is all a multiplication problem, and then division and also involved. In that situation, choose the lowest number of significant figures. So whichever one has that, the final answer will have that number of sig figs. Here we have two significant figures for these two values. These have three, so we're going to go with the weakest link, which is the 2 sig figs. So the answer will be reported as 2.84, 2.8 actually, 2 sig figs, 2.8. Okay, let's try the next problem on the screen. Enter it to the calculator and report with the correct number of significant figures. So again, the most important thing to remember here is to include the entire numerator in parentheses and the entire denominator in a set of parentheses as well. And when you're entering 10 to the third, most calculators have this caret symbol. So you just enter the 10, caret to the third. That's how you usually evaluate 10 to the third. Some calculators have a slightly different feature like x to the y. You can experiment with that if that's what your calculator has. And let's press enter. And here we have our answer. And once again, let us try to leave the answer in terms of appropriate significant figures. Here, the lowest significant figure in our expression is this value right here, 3.1, which has two significant figures. So we're going to round our final answer to two significant figures, and that will be 0.12. And I'd like to point out that you could, if you wanted to evaluate just everything at the top, write it down somewhere, maybe evaluate everything at the bottom, write it down somewhere, and then take the ratio of those two quantities. But if that's what you're going to do, I would suggest in the beginning, don't round the quantities, use the exact value you get from the calculator, take the ratio, and only in the final step round to the correct number of significant figures. But as you can see, that will be a tedious process, and it's really easier if you can enter the whole thing into the calculator directly. Now there is actually a way to enter the exponents in a slightly different notation. I'd like to also point that out. Basically, if you have something in scientific notation, something like 2 times 10 to the 3 multiplied by 3 times 10 to the 2. How could you enter this into the calculator? First approach, of course, is use the caret symbol, enter it as 10 to the power of 2, like that. But there is one more possibility. Now, before we go to the calculator, let's do this one in our by hand, because it's not too messy. So when you have scientific notation and multiplying two quantities in scientific notation, multiply the initial coefficient. So 2 times 3 is 6. And then when you're multiplying 10 to the third by 10 to the second, there you would add the exponents, right? So that'll be 10 to the 5. So that should be the correct answer for this question. And let's check it on the calculator and see how we can enter it with ease. So 2 times 10 to the 3. So again, you could do 2 times 10 to the use a caret symbol, but the easy way with exponential notation is this EE. And most calculators these days have that. So if you just put EE3, it knows this number as 2 times 10 to the third power. Then we want to multiply that by 3 times 10 to the second. So 3 EE2. Oops, sorry. I hit the wrong one this time. 3 I hit it twice by accident, so you just hit it one time and then 2. And it should know that that is 3 times 10 to the second. Press enter. Now it looks like the answer is different, but it's really the same if you think about it. 6 times 10 to the 5 basically is going to have 5 zeros after the 6, and that's exactly what we see over here. So depending on the question, you could leave, most of the time you'll likely leave the answer in scientific notation. So if you get this from the calculator, you would actually write it then again as 6 times 10 to the 5, as we have it over here. Okay, and one last question using scientific notation. Actually, looks like that was our last example right there. So that concludes our calculator tutorial part 1.